co-working space, Wework recently announced that it will be filing for bankruptcy. Now, the reason the story garnered a lot of eyeballs was because the startup space was very worried because this was once a startup that had seen exponential growth and was now filing for bankruptcy. But from an India perspective, the larger question today is after this news of filing for bankruptcy, how does this impact WeWork India? Will there be any disruptions? Do workers, employees need to be worried? And are we still bullish and hopeful as far as the co-working space is concerned? To talk about this and a lot more, I have a very special guest. I have Karan Virmani now joining us. He is the CEO of WeWork India. He's been kind enough to take us the time and join us. Thanks a lot for that, Karan.
No, thank you for having me.
So, Karan, as I pointed out, there's lots to discuss, but let's first get to the big question, which is after filing for bankruptcy, as far as WeWork Global is concerned, what are the direct impact and repercussions for WeWork India?
As of right now, there are absolutely very minimal, repercussions from the process itself that WeWork is going through is limited to the US and Canada. It's also a legal tool that businesses in the US have to restructure their balance sheet and essentially their secured and unsecured creditors, which is what WeWork is doing. As you can imagine, WeWork has, close to about 300 to 400 locations within the US itself. And in order to be able to get out of leases that aren't great, this process is the most efficient way to do that. So at the India level, we are a separate entity. They have a minority stake within the India entity, and the brand usage and brand rights are something completely separate and out of this process. So we see no impact on the business whatsoever.
So, Karan, a couple of things that I want to understand. One, who are you backed by, and what makes you so confident going forward as far as your investors are concerned? And secondly, if you could also help us understand the current workforce for WeWork India.
We are majority owned by the Embassy Group, which is a large real estate developer, which has been around for now 35, 40 years. We have one of the largest REITs in the country and, span across residential, hospitality, and property management as well. So the parent business is, a long-time developer. Um, that's been primarily our investor over the last 6 years. WeWork Global came in with about 100 million in 2020. And so the cap table is quite simple and just split between the two of us.
Sure.
In terms of the workforce, we have about 500 employees here in India, across 7 cities.
Okay. The other clarification that I wanted, Karan, and that was something that is on a lot of people's mind because you still use the same name. So will you still be allowed to use the same brand name, or will that now change going forward?
The brand continues, and the brand name continues for us here as well in India. Like I mentioned, it's a Chapter 11 process. So operations across the world for WeWork continue the same way they have or will in the future as well. And our agreement is a licensing and operating agreement for using the brand in India exclusively. And we want to continue to do that a lot because we feel like we've built the WeWork India brand, in India ourselves over the last 6 years, and the Indian market, Indian consumer understands the difference that exists.
Karan, if I understand this correctly, there is about a 20% investment from WeWork Global as far as the India operations are concerned. So what happens to that now going forward?
Nothing as of right now. Their shareholding and their, stays pretty much untouched. And like have mentioned before, the business is in a very good place where we have no need for external capital, at least for the foreseeable few years. And hence we don't, really see much happening from a cap table perspective in terms of any changes. However, we'll just see how this situation plays out and then, yeah, see what's best for the business.
Okay. Karan, I also want to understand. I started by saying this that the kind of exponential growth that Wework Global had seen, it had almost become like an example for other startups. When you see that filing for bankruptcy, what is the kind of issues do you think that face that can be learnings for other startups?
I think that the world has changed anyway post what
Pandemic.
happened with WeWork and then the pandemic. I think it was a series of events for, high growth and unprofitable businesses that existed in the past. Today, investors are very much focused around profitability and actually, the unit economics of the business being super strong. I
Sure.
think that what we learned and what we did when as we built the business over the last 6 years was really focus on unit economics and bringing on the right buildings in the right locations. So hence we never faced an issue that that happened at the global level. Today, what's happening with the US business is that there are lots of buildings in locations like San Francisco, New York, where people are just not coming back to the office and have also moved into smaller towns within the US. So if you look at WeWork's business in Miami, you'll see that it's doing extremely well. But in New York, where they had expanded for the last decade almost with a lot of locations, at one point they were the largest tenant in New York. There are locations that are basically burning, and that's what the Chapter 11 process is hopefully going to help them get out of.
So, Karan, just taking on from what you're saying, because you're saying certain locations are burning, how does that make you feel today? Isn't that a concern even for India? What makes you so confident and optimistic that the co-working space at large will not be not be impacted in the years to come?
So, WeWork itself in the US has about 40 million square foot of space.
Hmm.
Today, that's the entire flex segment in India across all players have about 40 million square foot. The
Hmm.
US has about 6 billion square foot of commercial real estate, and India has about 800 million square foot of, commercial real estate. So there's that we're not even like, just about 10% of what the US is in terms of supply and stock. And
Hmm.
then you look at what's happening in India today from a business activity perspective, the amount of hiring that large multinationals are doing, the growth of Indian businesses over the next few years is, set to be extremely bullish. And there isn't enough space available for all of these companies to take with it because there's limited supply. So I think if you look at just commercial real estate in the difference between India and the world, even today, it's starkly different from a traditional standpoint. And from a flex standpoint, flex workspaces have become almost 20-25% of that market.
Sure.
And so we just feel like there's more demand than supply, and that's why we, are bullish about our growth.
Karan, just last question that I want to understand, because you also said that a lot has changed post the pandemic. And for a sector like the co-working space, is it still going to be relevant going forward? The reason that I'm asking you this is we've seen a lot of offices now see a lot of success by going hybrid, by going remote. So will there be a real need for infrastructure, considering the fact that a lot of companies have realized that they can save cost here?
So our value prop is to make it more economical to start with. Our value proposition is to provide office when you need it and how you need it, which the traditional sort of environment doesn't allow for. And the way that the capital structure is built for traditional developers also, they work on an LRD model and they want long-term leases from long-term commitments from their clients. We don't
Hmm.
fund the business and work in that model, and hence it allows us to be much more flexible.
Okay.
And today, what we're seeing is absolutely what you said is that companies are more hybrid, which means
Hmm.
that they want to move in and out of offices based on their need. And also, what people are realizing about the office itself is that it's no longer a place to sit for 6, 7, 10 hours. It's a
Hmm.
place where I will have meetings, where I will collaborate, where I would like to build culture for my organization, where I want to do team events, where I want to, interact with different teams that I can't interact with either sitting at home. And so coming to the office is meant to become more meaningful than it was in the past. And I think the
Yeah.
experience we provide is unmatched when you look at all of those things.
Okay. Karan, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us and also bringing out that important clarification that there is going to be no impact as far as operations and employees for WeWork India is concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me again.